Welcome to Who Knew. We are fans of the current series of Doctor Who, and here we discuss our likes, dislikes, and insights into the modern regeneration of the show. Subscribe, review, and listen to us on iTunes and Stitcher, or our YouTube channel, youtube.com/WhoKnewPodcast. All our episodes are on WhoKnewPodcast.com. You can leave comments there, or email us at WhoKnewPodcast@gmail.com. We also have an Instagram and Twitter account. Tweet at us at WhoKnewPodcast, and find us on Facebook. Today we're taking a quick trip in the Tardis with Classic Who.
Today it's Who Classic.
Today's Classic Who episode is the third serial of the first season of Doctor Who, Edge of Destruction. When all aboard the TARDIS are mysteriously knocked unconscious, can the Doctor figure out what happened before they turn on each other or are killed? The first Doctor is played by William Hartnell. Susan Foreman, his granddaughter, is played by Carol Ann Ford. Her teachers, Barbara Wright and Ian Chesterton, are played by Jacqueline Hill and William Russell. The first episode was directed by Richard Martin, and the second episode, Brink of Disaster, is directed by Frank Cox. These episodes are written by David Whittaker, and they originally aired on the 8th and the 15th of February, 1964. Hi, this is Eugene. Let's introduce ourselves.
Hey, this is Josh.
Hi, this is Kelsey.
This is Brian.
Hi, this is Frank.
Hey, this is Heather.
Hello, this is Auburn.
While traveling in the TARDIS, the Doctor and his companions are knocked unconscious by an energy surge. Barbara and Susan wake up, and Susan gets a wave of pain in her head when she approaches the console. But it subsides as she moves away. They find the Doctor with a cut on his head, and Susan goes to get some water and bandages. The water dispensing machine indicates it is empty, but then produces a packet of water. Ian is waking up when Susan notices the TARDIS doors are slightly open. She says this is all terribly wrong and is afraid something has entered the ship. Barbara bandages the Doctor's head while Ian checks on the doors, which close as he approaches, only to open again when he moves away. Susan goes to check the door controls on the console but falls unconscious in pain. Barbara tends to a waking Doctor while Ian carries Susan to her bed. Ian also sees the dispensing machine says it's empty as it dispenses water. When he returns to the bedroom, Susan lunges at him with a pair of scissors. She tries to gain control of herself but freaks, stabs the bed multiple times, and faints.
Yeah, all that happened.
But where to start?
I will say this. I was quite intrigued from the beginning, but I went from, over the course of the show, I went from, whoa, what is happening, to what is happening?
Ditto.
Because I was actually quite intrigued, like I said, and like, oh, what does that mean? Like, what's and the vibe that it had of like a very slow, drawn out play, like whether or not that was just a sign of the times or the low budget, it really drew me in, and being that it was in black and white, it made it a little bit more mysterious. So I was quite into it at first, and then I thought, well, if I didn't understand something, I was like, well, we'll figure it out. I guess I'll find out what that means later. Little did I know, we wouldn't.
I was going to say there's some production stuff of why this feels different. Do we want to go into that now?
But what feels different than what? Other classic Who, modern Who?
A little bit of both. Because let me just give you some background on what happened so far. So this is the first season, and we had The Unearthly Child, which that serial ran for, I think, four episodes.
Yeah, I think so.
And then after that, that one has to do with like they go back to primitive times with cavemen, I believe. And
that's also the pilot. So this is where you see Ian and Barbara entering the TARDIS for the first time, and the Doctor taking them off of Earth, and then they go to prehistoric times.
So which episode, in order of airing, which one is this?
Okay, this is the third serial in the first season. So the first serial is The Unearthly Child, which introduces all the people we see here, which is Susan, the granddaughter. Barbara and Ian are her teachers in school, and they think something's off with Susan, so they go and find out where she lives. And then they get introduced to the Doctor and the TARDIS, and then they travel.
So is this idea of a Time Lord thing not a thing yet then? Are they...
No. All they know right now is that he's an alien. They know he's an alien, and this is the spaceship he's in.
But if she's his granddaughter, this is what I was curious about. So is she Gallifreyan?
Yes.
And did they explain that?
No. Because the term Gallifreyan isn't a thing yet.
Okay. Okay, so at the moment of this episode, production-wise, is he supposed to be an alien?
Yes.
And she's supposed to be his granddaughter, so is she supposed to be an alien?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And is that addressed yet?
Yes.
Okay. So her teacher, but she's on Earth because her teachers are human people on Earth.
Yeah, the
Correct.
doctor was studying Earth for a little bit, for a couple months, and she signed up to go to school.
Gotcha.
And she was
All right.
acting weird because, she's not from Earth.
I
And
see.
Barbara and Ian were worried, so they followed her, got into the TARDIS, and the doctor took off.
Gotcha. Well, that's very interesting.
In the second serial, they must have gone to Skaro because
Yeah,
they mention it in this episode.
Right.
Yes, you're right. So after The Unearthly Child, which is 4 episodes, the next serial is The Daleks, which is 7 episodes, and they're basically introduced to the classic nemesis of the Daleks on Skaro, and this is the first origin story of the Daleks, which is changed by Genesis of the Daleks. And then after this, we get Edge of Destruction, which is only 2 episodes, because they had to fill, I think it's, the Daleks went over budget, and then the next serial was supposed to be Marco Polo, which was heavy on costuming and period dress. So that took some time, so they needed to fill in the gap or give the production crew more time for Marco Polo. So that's when Whittaker was charged with writing just 2 episodes. So that's why this feels a little different.
I agree with Josh, though, that even though they didn't go outside and nothing really happened, I was really intrigued at first because it reminded me of The Twilight Zone. And so I was really excited to kind of watch things unravel. And then I don't know how I felt about the unraveling eventually. But in the beginning, I had really high expectations because I was kind of expecting like a Twilight Zone type episode.
Yeah, like a traditional bottle episode.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I wasn't familiar with his personality, so he was acting kind of weird and giving shifty looks. So I assumed, and they were that his mind was being taken over because they were insinuating that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Something was inside one of them.
All of them were distrustful of each other.
Right. And I didn't know even their personalities. Like, is that how that person is acting when they're distrustful and things like that?
Especially Susan was just being very off-putting, and I didn't know if that was how she was before or if this was different than her normal character.
Well, I have a question about Susan. How old is she supposed to be?
High school
Same
age.
question. High school?
16.
High school.
Like 16 or 17.
Okay, but she's not, like, the actor playing her is not 16 or 17. She looks 26.
Well,
Yeah, that's the way it always used to
the
be.
way Hollywood is, yeah. 90210.
These were.
I mean, even Beverly Hills 90210, they weren't that age.
Yeah. Everybody in Greece was in their 30s.
True. But I didn't see a 16-year-old. I saw an adult woman who was acting over the top.
Trying to stab people, no big deal.
Yeah, and I was assuming it was because she was being taken over by an alien force.
Me too. So it was really Susan who was stabbing? Or
All the characters are messed up in the head when they got knocked out.
okay.
They all came back to various stages of consciousness at different times. And so Barbara got hit really hard because when you first see them, Barbara's leaning over the console. So she's getting the full dose of the pain and all that kind of stuff. That's why she's relieved later on, for longer than everybody else. But Barbara doesn't stab things. Ian doesn't choke people.
Well, no.
You mean Susan was leaning over the console, right?
When they got knocked unconscious in the beginning,
Yeah.
everybody fell to the floor, but Susan fell over the console itself.
Right. You said Barbara before, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
I think it was
sorry.
Barbara.
No,
Well, that's interesting
Or left.
because I didn't even see Barbara, and she's the one who comes to first.
Yeah. And she walks in to see what happened and sees everybody knocked unconscious or beginning to stir.
So a little bit more about Susan is that she's typically the archetype of the damsel in distress type of character. Her job to me from the episodes I've seen is to get in peril and then to scream. And because that's what she does a lot, and I'm just giving that objectively, like there's nothing wrong with it. That's just what the time was. And she is in high school because she goes to Coal Hill School, which will come back later with Clara and Danny. That's the school that they're teaching at.
That's cool.
Also with Ace
Yeah, and
and the Seventh Doctor, they go to Coal Hill.
if you guys remember the Seventh Doctor podcast that we did, and it takes place in London, and it takes place outside a junkyard. That junkyard is where Ian and Barbara found the TARDIS.
Oh,
I did like the idea of the bandages, having the medication inside the bandage, and as it changes color and loses it, just become white, that the wound is now healed.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting too, to like track how out of it the Doctor was. Like,
Yeah.
because I kept thinking like, oh, is he going to snap into it and know what's going on?
He never really did.
No, he never really did. He said, "Well, you solved this, didn't you?" At the very end.
Thank God somebody did.
And I sorry to jump ahead, but when he's saying you solved all these things, and I'm sitting here like, what did she say? What? like I know a couple things that she's like, none of the pieces seem to have come. I still have questions. We'll get to them.
Also, since this is the first time we're doing an episode with the first Doctor, he is very different from the other Doctors. This is new. Nothing was set yet. They didn't have any plan. They were just making it up. And William Hartnell was playing him more as a gruff old man.
Like a grandfather, cranky grandfather.
Well, also it was, for me, the more shocking thing, and I think Josh probably feels the same way, is that he just wasn't brilliant the way that we always think of the Doctor.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think is speaking to the way you guys are feeling about the first Doctor is that William Hartnell is significantly, let's just say, older than other Doctors have been, and he had kind of a problem with all these lines that they were giving him. So what William Russell, who plays Ian, would do is he would give kind of the difficult stuff, the more tongue twisty things, the science speak. He would kind of split up those lines that were written for the Doctor amongst the cast, so then the Doctor could just go, yes, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he did. He flubbed the title of the episode.
Yeah, the second
Yeah.
part.
He also calls, because he normally says Chesterton when he's talking to Ian, calls him by his last name. He called him Charto.
I did appreciate how it really felt like a play. Like when they flubbed, they just kept going. They didn't worry about editing.
And that's because of the way that video was done at the time. There was no second takes or editing, or they didn't have the time for post-production.
Right. But I felt it gave it kind of a quaintness. And in opposition to that, though, usually what you don't see in productions this low, they did and I remember talking about this on other Classic Who's, the compositions and the cinematography choices, like the photography wasn't all that great, but the cinematography I felt was really cool. There was people in the foreground and background. There was one bit where Susan was hiding behind them, and there was a lot of nice compositions in the way things were framed, and it gave it a lot of drama and cinematic dynamicness.
Yeah.
There's one shot where I think it's Barbara, but it's like it's over Barbara's shoulder, looking past the console up to the monitor, and that was like, wow, that one got me, where it was like, must have been a difficult shot for them to get, because you're looking the opposite direction in the TARDIS than you normally do.
Yeah, it was funny because this is early stuff, and we're watching something that was made for like tube TVs. I don't know how this fits in, but it felt as if the soft focus kind of fit the narrative that they were telling.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't really let up, because they shot this way back when. And
so the plot was just as clear as the picture.
A little bit, yes.
There was the shadow when Susan was holding the knife, and the shadow behind it was a great shot of just her silhouette holding the knife, and that's again got me a lot of that Twilight Zone feel right before she started stabbing the bed. I mean, she does overact in a lot, but I think she really does well in acting unconscious. I know that sounds strange, but when she was on the bed, she really was totally lifeless. I mean, I thought she did really well with that, trying to get her in there and moving her around.
It's funny. I actually just played it right at that part, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, because that shot where it just goes to her with the scissors, her hair is just so up,
Yeah.
and it looks great on her in the black and white, the contrast. And then the camera slightly moves as if they're moving to get another frame. And I think that is unintentional, but it adds to the uneasiness of that scene where she has the scissors in her hand.
I also thought the cutaway shots were interesting, and I did surmise that was because of the camera movement, having to choreograph where all the cameras are depending on what part of the stage is going to be played next. Like some of those cutaways were, I'm thinking particularly when the doors open is really weird. The clock insert is also really weird. So while, yes, I do like the staginess and the cinematography of having to really load the frame with all of your characters, foreground, midground, and background, sometimes particular compositions didn't work for me.
Story-wise, it was hard to tell what was happening. The first time that they see that the doors are open, I didn't see doors that were open. I saw a weird vase thing, which turned out to be a pillar. Yeah, and then I saw a bunch of circles.
That was me too. I was so confused. I was like, "What are you freaking? I don't see anything."
Right. And then like a couple minutes later, when Chesterton walks towards the open doors, then it's a wide shot, and I can clearly see that there's doors opened. And I said to Auburn, "Why didn't they just use this as the insert?" And that's when he reminded me, like, "Oh no, they're editing live, and they, they're putting the camera where they can."
So that is how they edited it. They edited it live like an I Love Lucy show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that's why there was no takes or anything like that. Like when they got something, that they just kept going, like that clock, I'm assuming was something we were supposed to even know what it is.
The intention with the clock, though, is it's supposed to be melting, and it's not clearly conveyed.
Right, so I didn't even know it was a clock. I mean,
right.
Yeah,
I kind of knew after a half a second or so, but
yeah, and then when they do the insert of the wristwatch, it's so out of focus.
Yeah,
that I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, I enjoyed that this is the third story, and we get to see like what's in this thing that's bigger on the inside. Where in the season we're covering, only the Tardis console is huge. We don't get to see like where they sleep, where they take a nap, where the wardrobe is, where the swimming pool is. We always hear about the swimming pool, we never see it. So I like that these two episodes, we get to see certain things.
I know at one point Barbara actually says, like, "I'm going to my room," and I immediately thought, like, "Ooh, I wonder what that looks like."
Yeah.
I did like all the artifacts that the Doctor has around the TARDIS, or they have around the TARDIS. Like we saw the clock with the melted face, but then there was also other, like that pillar, and then there was some other like a sundial or something in the background of some of the shots.
And then that chair that I think Ian is unconscious in. At first, I was like, that looks an awful lot like an old electric chair. Like,
did anyone else think that the bandages were condoms?
Yes.
Yes.
Susan was
I didn't think they were, but
Oh, don't cut them! Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it's the 60s. They didn't have tears. You had to cut them.
Oh.
Right.
Right, and then you tie a knot at the end.
Works every time. 12% of the time.
And then there's things where the dispensers where they're getting the water and the milk. I was like, that's a primitive replicator.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, there were some very early ideas, and I will say too, like the theme song in this early incarnation of it. What year is this? This is
64.
Yeah, I found it to be very innovative.
Yeah. There's a reason that theme song has stayed the same because of that.
Yeah, and even just the bass line in the beginning, it doesn't sound like anything that was going on at that time.
No. Ron Grainer and Delia Derbyshire, they were very ahead of their time by creating that theme song. And that's why we thank them at the end of our episodes.
Well, before we move on, just one last thing about the set. Did you love the fact that one wall is an actual wall and then the other wall is just a sheet?
I didn't notice the sheet.
Yeah. You'll know when you see it. If you ever look again.
I'm looking now. Which wall?
It has like the round things are on the walls, but some of the round things are painted onto a sheet. They're not.
Yes,
Oh, I see it.
Yeah. They are very reminiscent of the Ninth Doctor and the early 10th Doctor's
Yeah, they all have the round thing. It's the round
Yeah.
things. I know.
Yeah.
You know what they are? No idea.
You're right. It is a backdrop that's painted.
Yeah, it's just a painted
Hey.
backdrop next to
Old me.
on wall.
But that's what happened when things were in black and white. You could fool the eye more.
Oh, yeah. Ian returns to the console room with the scissors and tells them what happened. The doctor is in pain but waking up. Barbara wants to know where they are, but the doctor doesn't know. Barbara wonders if something got into the ship, but the doctor dismisses her absurd ideas. Ian warns him to stay away from the console, so the doctor goes to check the fault locator in another room. While this is happening, Susan retrieves the scissors and sneaks back to her room.
With her hair nicely coiffed.
Ian looked like Hefflater, Hugh Hefner.
Wasn't it a Snuggie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were like potato sacks.
Yeah. Barbara and Susan sleep in Snuggies, and Ian has a robe.
Now, every time I heard them speak about the fault locator, it always just ran together to be a faulticator. And so what I kept hearing every time was a faulticator. I'd never heard fault locator until I put on the subtitle.
Closed captions.
Yes.
Well, it's hard to understand. It's not your faulticator.
Oh,
Oh,
I did like their English. It was not heavily accented. You know, today we get Scottish and Welsh. Like, was this more of the Queen's broadcast English back in the day?
The BBC was very much, well, and they say they kind of still are, but they're very much like, have a proper accent. And it really wasn't even so the whole country could understand. No, it was just the BBC saying, have a proper accent.
it didn't even feel like British. It felt just like somebody speaking very clear English.
They're also probably more stage actors at this point, and so have learned to over-enunciate a way that our modern television and film actors don't have to anymore.
I would call it more of an old-timey accent than a British accent. Like, oh, they just sound old-timey, whatever that means.
Oh, I guess they do. They do sound a little bit British, but yeah, they sound like Katharine Hepburn. They sound like they're from Connecticut.
what's it called? Mid-Atlantic?
Mid-Atlantic, yeah.
I think we did get a little bit of doctor-like banter. I wrote down a line of the doctor saying, "Where is less important than why," like around this time, which reminded me a lot of like a modern take on the doctor.
Yes.
That was about that. I was reaching for whatever connections to our modern out of this doctor.
All right, William, you got one. Good job.
And when Barbara was saying that she thinks something was in the ship, that also reminded me a lot of the Twilight Zone, how they built it up in that sentence. And then the doctor just seems so pompous and sexist to just dismiss her.
Yeah, but doesn't he also dismiss Ian just as easily?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Doesn't say-
that's the thing. That's why I thought something was possessing him, because Susan seemed like she was possessed, and then this guy, and then he was choking him, and then the doctor kept poo-pooing everything that they were saying, almost as if like they're gonna spoil my plan.
I had the same. Josh, you and I have the same brain watching this, I think.
Twilight Zone. The monsters are
On Main Street.
Maple Street.
Due on
Maple
Maple.
Street.
The monsters are due on Maple Street.
Okay, remember this is for kids, and this is for 10-year-olds. So what they're trying to show is how the fear can then be distrust, and fear is the enemy, because it turns out something so simple at the end. So to put it as what the story we're all expecting as adults now would not serve the purpose of what they're trying to portray. So you got to still be nice and treat your friends with respect when something's going on. Don't let the fear overtake you. It's something simple.
Wow. That's not what I got.
They should have had like a PSA at the end. Like, what did we learn today, kids?
Right. But it's still reflecting today with the whole COVID-19. How many people have just stockpiled everything and took it for themselves because they might need it in a couple months, rather than looking out for other people and go, do you need it more? It's like, I'll only take the part that I need for the immediate future, not a whole pallet worth of supplies.
I do like that idea that is, you mentioned, maybe a red herring, is that it reminds me of The Thing, or Who Goes There,
Yeah.
in that something has invaded some sort of facility and we don't know who's infected.
Yeah.
So that would have been kind of cool, if, pun intended, if we would have seen that play out instead of how it does play out.
Yeah.
Barbara checks on Susan, knowing she has the scissors. Susan holds them threateningly and demands to know what has come aboard the Tardis and why they want to keep it from her. As Barbara tries to reassure her, Susan struggles between attacking and letting go of the scissors. Barbara is able to pry them out of her grasp. Both are afraid something is hiding in the ship, possibly inside one of them. Ian tells them that the fault locator shows nothing wrong, and the doctor is going to turn on the outside scanner. Susan is afraid and runs to stop him.
At this point, I'm still, wow, this is all very interesting. I can't wait to find out what happened. What's happening?
Yeah, and that's why I think, not to negate what Frank said, but they've laid all these seeds in here for it to be like the Thing, or there's some sort of invader.
I get my point was that they never explain, and I agree with you, Frank, with your explanation. But
Yeah.
I don't think they sold. I think you sold it better in 1 or 2 sentences than this whole episode did.
Yeah, and so that's why I think that the things we're seeing as adult watchers are reminiscent of other things we've seen.
Yeah.
So it feels like the conclusion should have led to a certain way.
Yeah, we're watching this with film educated brains.
Right.
Well, the other thing too is, and this is kind of the reason why Eugene brought this episode up for us to do the podcast, it does introduce a concept that we know about 50 years later, and we'll get to it. They didn't sell it as well as they should, and if you were watching this cold, you wouldn't get it. But there's a reason why we're doing this episode right now, around the time of the Doctor's Wife episode. So where was I going with this?
I have no clue.
Oh, I do remember. It was because this all does have a reason. It's not explained very well, but it all does have a reason why it is happening and why it's happening in the certain way that it's happening. It's just told terrible.
Yeah, well, I don't have a problem with what I think is happening. They just didn't connect the dots well in the script.
They did not.
Because they only had 2 episodes to tell the story.
And we also had a short time to write it. They had to fill it in. Like, we gotta
But there was so much, like...
Well, if it's my understanding,
Yeah.
their memory loss and the whole thing, us thinking they're possessed, is time is being sucked away from them. So their memories are being sucked away. Am I on the right track as everyone else?
Yeah. It's like a bigger concept than I think they were prepared to execute.
Yeah, like she said, we were losing time, and then time was given back to us. So when they couldn't remember each other, it's because that time was taken away from them.
And it's running out.
Yeah, so...
Till when? Till what?
With my modern understanding of Doctor Who, I thought that when they kept referring to the machine trying to warn them, that the TARDIS was affecting them mentally.
I did read either Wikipedia or Wiki TARDIS that Susan has had episodes where she is psychic or sensitive to things, so that's why it's affecting her more. And because of the 2 Time Lords, it was affecting them differently with the pain than it was the humans, but it was affecting all of them. And
like
what's
that.
affecting them, I think, is the feeling of being trapped and going to die.
That makes the stabbing the bed scene more poignant. Like,
I read that as the will to stab Ian. Is it Ian or is it Neville?
Yes.
Yeah, she was overcoming that by
stabbing the bed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, but what made her violent to begin with? I don't understand why she would stab someone just because she didn't recognize them.
She's fearful. There's something going on. It's an emotional thing, not a logical thing.
Okay.
Whatever hit the head is affecting, I think, the emotion, even though I don't know if that's the part of the brain. But that's what I'm getting from this. That's why the doctor was so suspicious. It's like it's affecting emotions. Something's wrong. We're going to die. We can't leave. And so you just flash out.
It just seems that no one is properly reacting to it. And in the end, I mean, Barbara is very offended that the doctor is rude to her. But for some reason, nobody demands an apology for almost being stabbed or choked.
She's mad. But I think the thing that she was mad at, the doctor was coherent and when he said such horrible things, whereas Susan was out of her mind at the moment.
Okay.
And they know Susan, and they know that she does not act like this. So something is terribly wrong.
Right. She doesn't act like this, and now that we understand that she's a child-ish.
She's not responsible. That's why they don't think they need an apology. Like something has been affecting you, and it's not you who is doing it.
Fair enough.
I think I look at this episode different than everyone else because I just take the fact that they're acting so strangely as they all have concussions. That's all I think it is. Susan has the worst concussion. And it comes from, but then it's also tied to the console. You know, if you go near the console, you get stabbing pain. But there was an explosion, and very Star Trek like, they all fell to the floor because it was so shock. There was so much shock. So to me, it's like they've all got concussions, and they're all coming out of them at different points and different times, and it's just, that's how I look at it.
I guess. I mean, yeah. I mean, all right. The whole thing about getting closer to the console too felt very like, don't touch the floor, it's lava.
Yeah, very kid oriented.
In the end, though, again, they don't sell it well, but in the end, it makes sense.
Overall, I enjoy this story. I enjoy seeing these characters. I enjoy seeing the Doctor and the environment. It's definitely like kind of enriching. Is that the right?
Enriching.
It definitely enriches my Whovian scope. We're all dissecting the way the story is told in 1964. So, I find this very charming, and I find that even the things that we're picking apart, I still find it charming.
I'd like to go back to what Alburn was saying before and Brian touched on, where the reason we're doing this episode is because this is kind of a throwaway episode because it's a filler in between two bigger serials, and they created something that the TARDIS is sentient and alive. And then when we come back to the revival with Russell T Davies, we get that indication that the TARDIS is sentient in Boomtown. I think is the first time we get it in 2005.
I like that this was had that back then. I didn't realize that was something that they had this far back. And even the fact where she said he said the energy from the TARDIS. Did he even say the heart of the TARDIS? Did he say its heart?
No.
I'm conflating the two. So, but he mentioned about the energy from the TARDIS is underneath it, which they obviously drew from for the the Russell T Davies incarnation.
But not just that, not just the new version. I think they built on all the classic Who as well, built on all this stuff, and Russell's was a progression of that.
I guess I was pleased to see that idea was this far back.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see something geeky like that all the way back.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And then
I think it's great. I also love the fact that this is the third story, and the second story ever of Doctor Who is the Daleks.
Yeah. I do think the woman who played Barbara was the best actor out of everyone. I feel she kind of held the episode together.
Oh, yeah.
She really did.
Yeah.
I felt kind of bad for her as somebody who went to school for acting, and I was like, this poor woman. She is the glue holding this, I don't even know, soap opera.
It was like a soap opera. Now that once you mentioned that it was shot edited live.
But her best scene and the whole best scene of the whole series is coming up next.
Susan tells him that when she tried to touch the console earlier, there was a pain in the back of her head. The doctor says he must see what is outside the ship and tentatively activates the scanner. Nothing happens to him. The scanner shows a picture of London, and the door is open to a large roar from outside. They close the doors, and the picture changes to show the planet Quinnus, but they know that it is not outside either. The picture changes again to show the universe, and then a bright blast. The Doctor accuses Ian and Barbara of sabotaging the ship to force him to return them to England. Barbara is angry at the accusation and lists all the times they've saved the Doctor's life. She turns to leave and sees a clock melting. Their watches are getting affected as well, and Barbara throws hers across the room. She breaks down and the Doctor gets drinks for them all. Barbara is still angry with him, but takes the drink and leaves. Ian passes out after drinking his. The Doctor drugs them all.
Okay. All right.
I thought that scene that Barbara was just laying it into the Doctor and reading the riot act was great.
Yes.
Especially from Barbara and not from Ian.
Right.
And that's where they mentioned the Daleks. How about that time, we saved... Because I think she does that thing where it's like she mentions one thing that viewers didn't see, and then she mentions one thing that the viewers did see.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, even though there is a certain amount of, I don't want to say misogyny, there's a certain amount of unbalanced sexism throughout the early year classic Who, they always are making a point to put a spotlight on how women are marginalized and they shouldn't be.
But they also just have her break down right after that.
Exactly.
But it's because
I just didn't like that
because it's still in the 60s. It's kind of like it's almost like we shouldn't marginalize women, but they still are difficult.
Yeah.
Oh no.
We'll throw you out the phone, ladies. There you go.
Yeah. That's kind of like why don't you give them a shot? when it's needed.
And some of it's also pretty subtle too, because there's one point where it's like, oh, like Ian, if Ian figures something out, you're so smart. And if Barbara figures something out, wow, you used your intuition,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Women are blessed with intuition, whereas men are blessed with intelligence.
It's just kind of sad.
Yeah.
But see, I mean, obviously, she's kind of the lead of this whole, or even more than the Doctor.
Yes.
Because he's even, then he goes away, he comes out with, obviously coming out with tea, but with like, after this big fight, he's like, oh, have a drink, and it was obvious that he was gonna Cosby them.
It was weird to see the Doctor just suddenly shift and bring out a tray of drinks. I'm like, don't you want to see him drink out of the drink he's giving you first?
Yeah, I was waiting to see that. I was waiting to see if he could do it.
And see, these are certain things that I'm thinking of, again, as a modern, educated viewer of things. There's like certain expectations with a certain, I guess, hallmarks. Yeah.
I don't think Barbara drank it. To me, it just seemed like Barbara's too smart, and she just poured it into the plant or something and went to bed.
And the plant went meow.
With that sound effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Her women's intuition told her not to drink it.
The next time we see Barbara, she's lying in bed awake, upset, and Susan is the one who tries to make her feel better by saying, I'm sorry what my grandfather said to you. Try to understand. Aubrey and I had to watch this twice because we were so confused the first time through. And I did notice there are 2 cups on top of the water dispenser, right? Because after he hands out the drinks, Ian follows the Doctor into the next room, and they have they have a conversation with Susan lurking in the background. So maybe Susan and Barbara just set their cups there instead of drinking them. I don't know.
Yeah,
or they
maybe.
drink them and set them there.
You don't see Barbara drink it. She walks off screen.
Yeah, she walks off screen, puts it in that plant also off screen. It dies off screen.
Can we talk about the reaction to the clock? Because that really sold it for me.
Barbara's reaction?
Go for it.
Barbara and then Susan also
Susan, yes.
screams at the clock. Like, they both see the clock, and then they just start screaming at it. And then, Barbara throws her watch. Like, what is the point of that? Like, that seemed a little bit out of character for her after we've seen her be a little more intelligent.
Well, is this clock a prop that we see in the previous episodes?
I don't recall, but I don't think it is, just because it's like in the middle of the room almost.
Right, because I thought if this was something we were familiar with when we saw it was all jacked, then we would be like, oh my god, the clock is jacked. Instead, I saw something that I was like, what is that, a clock?
Yeah,
On my wrist was mutating. I might throw it too.
They react to it like it's with this all-knowing, oh my god, this is terrible. We are doomed.
Yeah. My other question for this sequence was the planet, the second planet that we saw, or the second photo that we saw. They were like, it's the planet, Quinnis? Was that from a previous series?
No.
Just a random
Not
other
that I
planet?
know of. Yeah. Just one of those things where it's an adventure that we do not see, I think.
Okay.
And it seemed like that was only Susan and the Doctor. I don't think the other companions were part of that. It seemed like we've been doing this before coming to Earth.
They hadn't gone to Clom yet.
It's funny when they turn on the monitors and you see those things. I think the effect was supposed to be more, let's just say, live, like a video instead of a photograph. And I don't know if Susan says it or the Doctor says it at this point. That can't be what's outside of the ship. That's a photograph. I go, yes, that's clearly a photograph.
And then the second one, Susan, is the one that says, that's also a photograph.
I'm like, yes, you guys are both correct. Those are photographs. Those are inserts.
But remember that the machine has memory of their drips, so it takes snapshots.
We're seeing this like 100 times more clear than it was meant to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm saying that I'm coming from it from a modern viewer, that I'm used to that being like a live video. Every time, Matt Smith pulls over that thing and it's like a TV. So that's when I think of when I see them looking at things like this.
Well, the fun part is later on, when they're trying to show outside, they actually are showing a photograph, but they're going, no, that's outside.
Yeah.
It's budget.
It's all budget and time.
The Doctor is at the console when Ian suddenly tries to strangle him. Ian fights the desire to kill the Doctor and faints. This is the proof the Doctor needs to throw them off the ship. The danger signal blares and the fault locator shows everything is wrong. Ian tries to strangle Barbara while insisting that the TARDIS controls are alive before fainting again. The Doctor realizes that the ship is going to disintegrate. He doesn't know why, but Barbara and Ian couldn't be the cause of it. The danger signal is going off every 15 seconds, which gives them a way to measure time. The Doctor explains that the center column of the console sits above the heart of the TARDIS. Its movement is the TARDIS trying to release its power. If it does this without the other systems working, it will destroy them all.
Okay. Sure.
He doesn't say heart though, right? Or does he? He says like the
that's
power
what
source
power.
or yeah.
But we all know it's the heart of the TARDIS, so.
Right, from a modern viewer.
He also doesn't call it the TARDIS. He keeps referring to it as his machine, which I thought was, as a new Who viewer, was odd to me.
Yeah.
Like
I
don't know. Do they even say TARDIS
They do once.
in this? Once, okay.
Barbara does, I think.
The
in part one.
TARDIS.
When they're talking about this danger signal every 15 seconds, it's weird how that sound is so present. I wish they would have cut back on that. And I expected it to be the cloister bell, because that's always the indicator that something's wrong.
I do like that a lot better than the foghorn.
And checking back on it, I think it is, they do mention that it is the heart of the TARDIS.
I couldn't remember if that was something. I think my brain confused itself.
There was a really good line that the Doctor gave at this point as well, that rash actions are worse than no action at all. I thought that was a good line.
That's a good lesson.
So Frank, that quote of that line of the Doctor always reminds me of "Evil persists when good men do nothing."
But actually, those two phrases kind of compete with each other.
I know, but I'm just saying it reminds me of that.
Oh,
I'm not saying that they're the same. Sorry.
yeah,
Just to clear that up.
I see that.
That conflict in thinking gives me a rash.
Oh, God.
I did like that they had Susan being smart. I mean, Barbara's like, you don't have a watch, nothing's working. How did you know how many I counted? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
and it's just, I liked it, that she just did it.
But then I do like right after that, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Go count again.
Yeah.
Keep counting.
Well, one thing I didn't understand was why Ian tried to strangle Barbara. Was he just in a strangling mood and just like any neck that was close?
That sounds as good as an explanation as
All
any.
right.
But before, we gave Susan the excuse of being a Time Lord, but and being more strongly affected. But Ian is just a psychopath? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the Gallifreyan sleeping drugs.
Has some after effects.
It's the one thing to think that someone's a saboteur, and it's another thing to like immediately just want to kill them, and then never mention. Once you're in your right state of mind, never mention, "Oh, sorry, I was going to kill you."
That's why Barbara had such a chip on her shoulder, why she was holding that grudge. She feels
Well, he apologizes to her later, but
Nope. He does
doesn't
not.
At the very
He says,
end.
"Why won't you forgive me?"
Well, that's the 1964 octogenarian way of saying.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
he does say we all owe you our lives, which is not an apology, but it's. I guess that's the best.
Hey, even Fonzie couldn't say "I'm sorry."
Oh my God, you're right. Wow.
And he was the coolest.
But he gave her something more than an apology. He gave her respect, finally.
I think he probably could have done with both, but
Yeah.
They also gave them all a Coke and a smile.
You're right.
Barbara believes that everything that has happened must be clues. The water dispenser showing empty when it wasn't, the clock melting so they would notice time, and the area around the scanner being the only part of the console that they could touch. All of this, and the doors and images, are the ship's way of warning them. The Doctor deduces they must have wound up at the beginning of time. Ian asks where they were headed before all this began, and the Doctor says they were on Skaro. He used the fast return switch to get them back to present-day England, but they overshot their time. Examining the controls, the Doctor finds the switch is stuck, constantly sending them back in time. He fixes the switch, and the TARDIS is free to travel again.
ta-da!
The writing of the fast return was handwritten.
With like a Sharpie?
Yeah, there's several myths, rumors about what happened. Carol Ann Ford says that when her and William Hartnell were rehearsing, they wrote that on the console so that William Hartnell would know where to point to and act around, so that he constantly would go to the same switch. And then they thought that the set dressing people would go in and paint over that. That's her version.
Why did they cast this ancient man? Was there no one else in England?
You want to know something? He is younger than Peter Capaldi when Capaldi took over.
Yeah, but that's 1964 50s. 50-something years old, not...
I don't think he was, like, famous, but he was a character actor. And
So during this time, William Hartnell had stopped getting acting gigs. I think the last thing he did was some army show. I think the Army Game, and then after that, he was thankful to be acting again. It kind of revived him. What would you call it? Emotionally.
Wow, Eugene, you make me feel like an asshole. He was on the brink of suicide.
go watch An Adventure in Time and Space. Very sad.
And that's where I'm coming from, is watching that docudrama. And,
I actually have seen part of it. It really
Which
just
docudrama?
the one that
Adventure in Time and Space.
Filch plays William Hartnell.
Yeah, Walter Frey plays the first Doctor. Anyway, I'm just looking through Wikipedia real quick. Verdi Lambert was the one to offer William Hartnell the title role. Although Hartnell was initially uncertain about accepting the part, it was pitched to him as a children's series. He later revealed that he took the role because it led him away from the gruff military parts he had been typecasted as. And that he had two grandchildren of his own, so he came to relish particularly the attention and affection that playing the character brought him from children.
Just messed up kids. Sorry.
Well, this is post World War II, so the country or the world was doing some healing.
I also noticed that, sorry to jump ahead, but in the credits, he plays the role of Dr. Who.
Yes, that's how it always was in the classic Who.
That makes me feel like such a hypocrite. Every time at work, somebody who's not me writes Dr. Who. I'm always like, would you like it if someone abbreviated your name and put a dot?
Yeah, this is where Barbara smart she is, and she put together all the clues of the TARDIS has a built-in defense, and that's what's been going. I didn't get the pictures showing an order of their journey, realizing that it was going back.
Yeah.
Because there was England, where they picked up Barbara and Ian, and before that was the planet that only the Doctor and Susan went to, and then before that is like the start of the planet, and then exploding with the Big Bang.
Yeah, I didn't get that either. I thought she was, and knowing that it was supposed to be in reverse, that makes more sense. The Barbara was the one that was putting the dots together, and the Doctor was dismissing that. He was saying, even when she was like, oh, there's something about the scanner, maybe, we should look at the scanner again. And he's like, yeah, why don't you two women go stand over by the doors, and when the doors open, tell me what you see. And then he turns to Ian, he's like, I lied. We're all going to be dead in 5 minutes, and they won't know that because I've sent them off to do this. I guess as a modern viewer, I'm used to seeing happen, is the Doctor being like, okay, let's follow up on that theory, Barbara. And that isn't what happened. Her theory was dismissed, and it was I thought that was why we were watching this episode, was the point that the Doctor lies. And I was like, if that's why we're watching this episode, but I'm glad that you chose this for the other reason, that this is the TARDIS being sentient.
Yeah.
And we haven't done a first Doctor episode, so we thought this was the best time to introduce him to you guys.
Also, in 1964, what the Doctor does wouldn't have been considered lying. It would have been
a courtesy.
A courtesy, yeah. It would have been, don't let the women folk get worried, and, like you would treat a child. And we, the men folk, can handle the truth. But the audience wouldn't think that was bad in 64. Audience would expect that.
Mm-hmm. It's just... But it's just weird that it comes right after she's put all these pieces together and is still in the process of trying to help the Doctor solve the issue.
I think it's an interesting sociological point of view of how the writing is writing this woman character very as a very rich character, but the writing is also still being instilled with what Brian is talking about in the 1964 values. It's an interesting anthropological look at it.
I mean, she's very smart, but they are in no way equals.
Which makes no sense.
Because he sends Susan and Barbara to go look at the door. It's not about
Right. They both can't handle it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be able to handle it, and they would be so upset. Or the Doctor is doing it as a kindness.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, it's the man being in control.
Mm-hmm. Because he also tells Ian.
The patriarch.
Yeah, he tells Ian, it's like, the men folk will dutifully carry on, and then everything blows up, and the women will be like, we could have fixed it.
What would have made this better for me is that if he sent Ian and Barbara to the door and then confided in Susan, because that makes more sense character-wise, is that we're both Gallifreyan. Yeah. We can solve this where humans can't.
Yeah.
But I did like the ending where it was, this is how a spring works.
Yeah, I know.
Explaining it to Susan I was getting like third-party humiliation, embarrassment from watching that.
That was weird.
Well, that was just what
like
the kids were watching.
Yeah, that was for the kids.
Yeah, it was for the
Something
kids.
simple. This is how you can fix it. And...
But the whole episode is like kind of complicated, and then all of a sudden we get our Sesame Street moment. I don't.
We get all this complicated plots, and then we get thoroughly explained how to work a button.
Yeah, but isn't that G.I. Joe at the end of every episode? Hey, kids, what is it?
And now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe.
I guess we only got a quarter of the battle in this episode.
If he hadn't sent them away, he could have just been explained once. But,
Susan knew where the button was. That's near the scanner. And
Yeah.
he's like looking for it.
That's right.
Well,
in the dark.
Yeah.
It's right next to the scanner.
Really? The set lighting isn't enough for you? We can see it.
and the felt tip writing isn't enough. But when everything's all solved, they do a great shot of Hartnell as he faces the other side of the console that we're not used to seeing. And to me, that's like as if this was a sitcom or a stage play, that's where the audience would be, the orchestra pit.
Mm-hmm.
Like we get that reverse shot, which you don't see a lot of.
When is this?
At the end, when he's talking about the Big Bang and then the dust, and then that
His speech
kind of coming together. His last speech in the thing.
Soliloquy.
The picture's a little darker, I think, because it's lit, more backlit.
Nobody else is on the set at that point. Hartnell has to do a big speech, and it's like, just focus on him, because it's going to take a while. And everybody else is probably already at home by the time he got it completely right. And I think that's why the lighting's different and all that kind of, because it's not at the same.
It's gotten dark out.
Yeah.
Yeah, to hide the fact that you can see all the cameras and chairs and all the lighting.
Was somebody
equipment.
probably holding up cue cards for him too?
I bet they were.
But he does a good job because, like I mentioned earlier, William Russell was trying to alleviate the hard lines for William Hartnell, but he delivers acting in that final speech, and I thought that was great. And you can see him again as an actor.
Acting.
Even though what he's saying kind of doesn't make sense, like physics-wise.
It's okay.
Well, Hartnell sells it, and he delivers. He's like, that's who I think of as the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very Doctor moment.
The Doctor apologizes to Barbara and Ian. At first, Barbara does not accept it, but later, after a brief heart-to-heart, does. The TARDIS safely lands on a cold planet, and the team goes out for a snowball fight. And in the snow, they find a giant's footprint.
It's funny when she says, it looks like it belongs to a giant, and they pan down. I thought it was going to be like 3 feet wide. It's like a big foot.
A tall person.
A tall person.
A basketball player's foot.
The new
Yeah, or
bowl.
Andre the Giant.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, representing. Ooh.
Oh, look at that. I didn't even think. I didn't even notice.
I think
Subliminally.
Barbara only accepts the Doctor semi-apology, not apology, after he offers her new clothes. Like, there's a wardrobe here, and here's some cold weather coats for you.
Oh, that's right. He does.
She just realizes what he's capable of doing, how much he's able to apologize, and showing that he's like, no, I'm appreciative of you. So she guess that's what he's trying to do.
We'll go with that.
We're also British.
Also,
They're not all touchy-feely back in the time period.
it's also the end of the entire story, so it's like a sitcom. Everybody has to be happy, and you know.
She looked very nice in that coat, so.
And then Ian had a hand-me-down.
Yeah,
Ian was like Sherlock Holmes up in there.
and he got it from
I thought it was for two people.
yeah Gilbert and
It
Sullivan.
was cute. It was like, is that the only prop you guys have in the prop room?
Well, that's funny. I like that.
It was. It was. I like that they made mention of it because he's like, oh, it does feel like it would fit both Gilbert and Sullivan at the same time.
Now, Eugene or anybody, was the next story about the giant that they found, or is that just lost in history?
Well, the next one is Marco Polo, so it does take place after that, and it's a past episode, so it's a period piece.
Yeah.
Because they're like in the Himalayas.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Cool.
not
So
what
does
I
it have
thought
a
of when I
Yeti or
thought
something?
Marco Polo.
Yeah, because they're picked up by Marco Polo's caravan on its way along the Silk Road to see an emperor, Kublai Khan.
Hmm.
But Marco Polo is missing, at least on our...
Yeah, Marco Polo is one of the lost episodes.
Oh. So it is lost to history.
Is it Planet Xanadu?
On roller skates?
Yeah.
So speaking of that, the Edge of Destruction episodes were both recorded on 16mm tele recordings, and then both were recovered from negative prints discovered at BBC Enterprises in 1978.
Wow.
A tele-recording is a film recording of something originally shot on another medium, usually videotape. So these were tele-recordings, meaning that these were sent out to the broadcasters to air for their networks.
Okay, so they had some sort of like the film is. They probably had a adjuster where the film camera would film the television set somehow.
This is also I think the first and only full-length story featuring the Doctor and only his companions, and it's probably the smallest of any of Doctor Who's cast. 4 characters. Yeah.
Really? Oh, I guess so. There's no villain. There's no villain character.
The villain is the spring.
So there was an actual technical malfunction that caused this whole thing to happen.
Yeah.
All right.
The fast rewind was going constantly.
And the TARDIS was throwing out all these things like, hey, you're going to die. Pay attention.
Yeah,
Figure it
see,
out.
I just thought when he was explaining the button thing, he explained how he fixed it, not what was
going on.
Josh,
not
clearly
went wrong.
the button explanation was not clear enough for you. So you should maybe go back, give it a second view,
Maybe I should.
just to make sure.
It was like the flashlight was on the whole time.
Right.
No, this was fun though. Like
Good. I'm glad.
I didn't
It
fall
was, no,
asleep.
I enjoyed it.
I think it kept everyone interested because they were trying so hard to figure out
Yeah.
like what was going on.
I gotta say, we make fun a lot of the faults of these earlier episodes, but I expected these classic Who's to be a lot worse. I've enjoyed this, all our trips in the quick trips in the TARDIS is very much. It's just research wise, because I thought they were going to be unwatchable.
I would like to mention that this is my first Classic Who episode.
Ah,
Now, I have
okay.
seen bits and pieces because the BBC used to play it on TV, and I would like just have it on in the background or something. Of like I think the Fifth Doctor maybe, but this is the first time I've sat down and watched from beginning to end a full Classic Who episode.
Wow.
I know earlier we talked about the TARDIS having furniture and feeling more like a house, and I didn't realize until Kelsey mentioned that, but that is also like a throwback that this past season of Modern Who did, where we had some other TARDISes that looked more like a house, even on the inside. So that's just more connections that this last season really, like they went deep on connections to the original Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that this episode reminded me of one of my favorite season 5 episodes, which is Amy's Choice, because of the problem being inside the TARDIS itself. Whereas Amy's Choice, that was the one with the Dream Lord, and it was like something that was inside like the TARDIS that was manipulating like the dreams that everyone was having. And even though in that one we did go out into this other town. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this episode reminded me of a current, season 5 episode. So I like the plot of this episode a lot. I just wish I had been able to understand everything that was happening when it was happening.
Well, that's why we have a podcast to help clear it up. I honestly think that the whole ending with it just being the switch getting stuck, I do think it could have been a good ending if it was just done differently.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Like, because it's almost like a bait and switch, but in that's kind of clever way. Except it wasn't done cleverly.
Right. Yeah, it goes along with, fear being the enemy. That's
right. It's the Monsters of Maple Street thing again. Like,
yeah.
It can be a very compelling story, and you can go like, it's just they just needed to find a different way for the punchline, so to speak.
Yeah.
You said it was a good twist, but it was a humorous twist. It was to be a Three's Company twist, and there was all misunderstanding type of thing. So I thought that was humorous because they both laughed at it, saying, "Oh, I'm becoming a little daft old man."
Maybe they didn't laugh enough though. Like maybe they all needed to look at each other like, "Oh my God, we almost killed each other."
Yeah, because it is shot differently, like we mentioned, stage play rather than like a 3-camera setup for a sitcom or a drama. Yeah, we chose Edge of Destruction because it ties in with the sentience of the Tardis and how the Doctor's wife kind of brings that to a whole new level.
Yes.
That wraps up Edge of Destruction. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time when the future becomes the present.
You've just listened to an episode of Who Knew?
Our wonderful theme music is by Michael Grady.
Find him on Facebook at The Universe Explodes.
All our episodes are engineered by Auburn.
You can find him at auburnbinkley.com.
You can also find this show in several places.
Follow us on Twitter at Who Knew Podcast.
Subscribe, review, and listen to us on iTunes and Stitcher.
Or our YouTube channel, youtube.com/whoknewpodcast.
All our episodes are on whoknewpodcast.com.
Visit our Facebook page.
Please leave comments, reviews, and click like to help support Who Knew Podcast.
To listen to our show on your Amazon Echo device, enable the AnyPod podcast skill. Ask AnyPod to play the Who Knew Podcast.
This podcast is inspired by Doctor Who,
the longest-running sci-fi show in history.
And especially the revival, spearheaded by Russell T. Davis.
Thanks to Russell,
Sidney Newman,
Verity Lambert,
Ron Grainer,
Delia Derbyshire,
and all those involved in the adventures of our favorite Time Lord.
Your work continues to inspire and entertain.
Well, it was recording. I don't know how he was.
He just disappeared.
Tell him to refresh.
Refresh which?
His page. He's doing exactly what he's been asked to do.
Okay.
Everybody calm down.
Has this episode taught us nothing?
It's just the switch, guys.
Heather, put down those scissors.
Ah! Oh, my cat just freaked out. I'm sorry.
All right, I think you're back, Eugene. Can you hear us?
Alfred, stop choking me.
Okay, there, finally went up.
Now I can hear you.
That was so weird. Okay, so before this gets any more screwy.
Rolling.
Yeah, we're
All
only
right,
43 minutes into our scheduled start time.
Well, I factored in the troubleshooting.
I know, I'm just being a smart aleck. It's my role in the group, right?
Yes. Yeah, they said Ian looks at it and he says, here, very slowly, Doctor, I thought it only moved when the power was on. Yes, but the heart of the machine is under the column.
Somebody give him an award.
Josh.
Excellent rendition.
Bow, Josh.